We need to know how is it that we're going to interact as users generate data for us, right? Up to this point, the data that we've been looking at is just static arrays, right? But users need to be able to actually click on and delete a particular piece of data or provide new data. So we need to know how to deal with forms. So to deal with forms, we need to introduce a new concept, right? We need to introduce how is it that we maintain state in an application, in a React application, right? As users interact with us and provide data to us, we need to be able to represent that data and realize that as folks provide new data, it needs to be stored somewhere, right? Eventually, everything's going to be stored on the server, right? But we don't have that yet. So the only place that we can store it right now is in the memory of the browser, okay? And the way we manage the data as it is manipulated, as it's mutated, is through state management, right? React state management, and we'll talk about how to do that, right? Right now we are using stateless components, right? All these components that we've been playing around with, that we presented last week, right? These are all stateless components. I mentioned, if you remember, last week we said that let's play around with stateless components. There's no way for them to store anything. There's no way for them to maintain any state. For that, to maintain state, we need to use full classes, right? Full JavaScript classes, right? So we're gonna be refactoring it just a little bit so that we can actually maintain state, right? Because we're going to be manipulating the data as we progress. We need to be able to know that you removed this, you updated this, you changed the title. That needs to be stored somewhere, and we have no place to store it right now. All right, so let's revisit this a little bit. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So here's an example on refactoring the module list. If you remember, the module list, the current implementation of the module list is implemented as a stateless component. Right, it's a stateless component right now. Right, it's just a plain old function that takes as argument a course, right? That just iterates over the modules, right? Displaying the module list. So we need to make this stateful, right? As in, for instance, I would like to be able to create a brand new module. I need to be able to type in the title of the new module and then say create. Yes. Where am I going to store that? Where am I going to put that? Right. So to do that, we need to refactor this to be a stateful component, right? Also, we're going to add here some event handlers, right? As users click and drag and generate a stream of events, we need functions here that handle all those events. Yes, right. So you can only do that in stateful classes. Right? So let's do that. Let's refactor the module list into a stateful component. Let's do that. So I'm going to leave the module list as stays like this. So I'm not going to touch this. I'm going to instead implement a different version of this, but a stateful version of this. All right. For now, it's going to look very, very similar. Let's see, module list. Right? And so I'm going to create a JavaScript here, and it'll be module list. Right? Now, to differentiate this from somebody who's stateless or stateful, there is somewhat of a naming convention, right? If you are a component whose responsibility is to maintain state and to provide event handlers that manipulate that state, right? That your primary concern is managing the state, and you are delegating the rendering to some other components, then we refer to you as a container. Okay, a React container, right? Programmatically, they're the same thing, right? They're nothing, but we're saying that most of your responsibility is to maintain state and handle events, all right? And you are somewhat delegating most of the rendering to some other component. And you're only providing the state to that component, okay? So it's a naming convention. That's all. So let's import React from React. And to create it, we'll do the same export into default and the class for the module list container. Now, what would make this, so this up to this point is just, this is just a plain class, right? What makes it into a React class is that this is going to extend React.component. Okay, now I am a React component. I'm a React component, and I can have a full-blown constructor, okay, with properties, right? And I need to do a requirement. In a require, notice that it's you have that red squiggly line tells me that there's something missing, right? It's complaining, saying that, hey, your parent component, it's expecting you to call it with those properties, right? So if you do a super props, then it's happy. Okay, all right. All right. So the other thing here is that the rendering actually happens by overriding the render function, and whatever the render function returns is what we actually render. Right? So we're going to render here. I'm going to say I'm going to return here the h2 here, saying that this is a module list. Okay. All right, so we already had a module list, right? We already have a module list, and it's being used here on the whiteboard, I believe. Right, so here's the whiteboard. Oh no, actually no, it's actually being used in the course editor. Yes, the course editor is using the module list. See that? Right. I'm going to replace that. I'm going to replace that with my container. So right now it's just rendering. Let's see, where was it rendering? Right here, it's right here. It's rendering right here. This module is on the left-hand side. See that? So I'm going to replace that. Instead of using this modulus, I'm going to comment that out. Notice that's not going to render anything on the left side anymore. Right, I'm going to replace it with my brand new modulus container. Okay, so now on my left-hand side says just module list. Yes? Right, it's not very exciting. Right, so it's doing the same thing that we had originally, our stateless modulus. There's no difference. Right? The only difference is that now I am free to maintain state in my modulus container. I can maintain state. And the way we maintain state is through the following. We say this dot state, and the state is whatever I assign to this object. Whatever I assign to this object. Right? And also we provide event handlers that are going to allow for us to remove modules, add new modules, edit modules, and all those event handlers are going to manipulate that state. Right? And the rendering, and the way we render here is through the rendering of the state. So let's start off with a hard-coded list of modules, right? So we're going to say modules. It'll be some array, right? And I believe we already had some arrays, didn't we? Where was that? Perhaps modulus. Did modulus have a? Apparently not. Where was our here? Oh, it was in courses.modules, right? It was inside of courses.modules. That's fine. We can pass that in. Before we do that, though, I did want to demonstrate for you. Let's see who's providing that. I believe the editor, isn't it? Yeah, there it is, right? Here's our modules, right? So I'm just going to copy this array of modules for now. Let me copy that. Copy that, and I go back to my container. I'm just going to paste that array of modules right here. Everybody okay? So once I have that, presumably I can use the same technique that the old modulus was doing of just iterating over this. Right? I can just use the same exact mechanism. Right? Actually, I could just copy this. I could just copy this, the old modulus, and implement it in my container. In my container, right, I can just replace that. I have the same exact code, except that I don't have a course. I don't have a course. Instead, what I have is a state variable, right? And the modules lives in the state variable. So I can access it from here. I can say this course. I can say this dot state dot modules, and then I can iterate over that. Yes? Everybody okay? Yes. Oh, certainly. That is the design pattern. Typically, is that you have the container containing several stateless components. So you have a stateful container containing several stateless components, right? And the stateless components are the one who actually render, right? And the container's only responsibility is to provide the data, right? And all the event handlers that would be needed to delete a component, add a component, update a component, right? So what would happen is that we need to establish the communication between the two, right? And so if it's a component down here who wants to be removed, right? It may be a course a module list item way down there that has the X button. It's not its responsibility to delete itself. Instead, it notifies up the chain of command, up to the container and says, "Oh, container, I want to be removed." Right? And then the container's responsibility is to, "Oh, okay, let me iterate, remove that, and then I'll provide you the new list, and get everything gets re-rendered." Okay, and that's what we're going to do. All right, excellent. So we remove that. So if we go back, notice that the actual rendering, the most of the rendering is happening down here, right, by the module list items over here. I'm just iterating over them, but I don't know how these things are being rendered. If I go back to the UI, notice that we have the same list that we had before. See that? We have exactly the same list, right? Only that it's implemented now using a stateful component instead of a stateless component. So I haven't gained much here, right? Actually, it looks like I've lost several things, right? This looks so much more complicated than my stateless component. What's the deal? But again, the responsibility of the container is to manage the state and provide event handlers to handle this. All right. So let's go a little further. Let's show how is that we would go about maybe creating a brand new module, right? For instance, providing a form, right? So for instance, let's create a brand new form here. Let's do li, and in this li line item, let's create an input form, right? So input. Let's see what that looks like. All right, so we have an li over there and an input field. Let's style it a little bit so it doesn't look that ugly. So make this a class name. This will be a list group item. Okay, that looks a little bit better. And for the form, for the input form here, well, let's paint this a little bit. We'll use form control. There it is, form control. What this is going to do is that it's going to expand my input field to take up the entire width of my parent component. All right. Let's see. What else? What else do we need? Maybe a placeholder saying that what do we want? We want giving some hint here that we want to say module title. So a little hint of what do we want you to type in there. Okay. The other thing that we might need is perhaps a button or something that we can click on to be able to create a new module. So let's create a button right underneath. We'll say button, and this will say create. Let's see, so that's under there. There it is. Let's paint it a little bit. We'll say, again, using Bootstrap. And this will be a BTN. And so that gives it just a little bit of styling. We'll color it maybe. We'll call it primary. So that gives it the color blue. And we can also expand it also to take up the entire width of the container by using button block. Button block. Oops, no, just block. It refreshes. Refresh. There it is. So it takes up the entire width of the container. So what we like to be able to do is use this tiny little form that whenever we click on create, it takes the title and then adds it to the current list of modules. Right. So let's see how we do that. So there's a couple things that we need to do, some boilerplate, some plumbing that we need to do, and it's documented here in the slides over here. One of the things that we need to do is have the form. We need to listen for, as the user types the title, right? For every keystroke, we need to store that somewhere. And what we're going to do is that we're going to use the onChange command, event handler, to notify this function that something happened. The user typed something. We need to keep track of every single keystroke. So let's do that. We're gonna come here and in the input field, we're gonna say on change, call this function this dot module or title changed. Okay, and we'll declare that function right here. So we'll call it title changed function, and we can look at the event that gets generated in console log event. All right, let's inspect what's going on here. Let's look at the console, and let's clear that. So notice that as we generate, as we type, we are generating events. We are generating events. We see that somewhere here is the current target. The current target is who? Let's see. We hover over it. Where is the event? Oh, okay. All right. So it's been encapsulated by React. So we don't actually have. What is it complaining about here? This what are you complaining about? Oh, it must have been an old thing. So what we need to do here is as we type, we want to look at the target value, right? What is that? The keystroke that you're actually typing. We can get it by looking at event current target dot value. Let's see what we get. So let's clear that, and here is what we are typing. See that? All right. So we have access to every single keystroke. What we want to do is we need to be able to store this somewhere and build a title so that when you click on the button to create the button, right? The create button, we have the actual title and we can create a brand new module. Right? So let's do that. Let's store it somewhere. We need to store it somewhere, and we'll store it in the state. We'll say a new module. Say new module, and the new module will be an empty object. Presumably of some module that we're going to be building, and is going to have a default title of an empty string. Yes?
Could you combine jQuery and React so you don't have to write out the HTML here, and you can just use like the templates like we were doing before?
Okay. So you want to, well, the way you would do that is that you would, most of the HTML would live in a stateless component, right? With no behaviors, no functions that handle anything. They're only pass data for rendering, and that's the point, right? Where you have most of the behavior here in the container, and the rendering is left over and that's how you break it up. Yeah. So the components, the components play the role of our templates, right? And the class containers play the role of our components. Right, where the components were only event handling, right, only data access, data manipulation, right, and the templates only did rendering. So same thing here. You have the same kind of role. They play different roles, right? All right. So here's a new module. It's an empty string, and what we want to be able to do is to get back and modify this state and say, hey, new module, your title is now the latest value of our current target. Right? And we would be, one way that you could do this, we would say something like this dot state dot new module. You would think you would do this, right? This is what would make total sense, right? This dot state dot new module dot title is equal to this, right? So this would be the first naive way that you would think that you would do this, but it turns out that this is not the way we want to do it, right? The modification of this state. The modification of this state happens asynchronously. Right? What happens is that any changes of the state need to be handled by React. It needs to be able to keep track of a whole bunch of things that are happening, right? Synchronize all those changes, and then stream and then make the changes to the DOM synchronously, right? So the manipulation of the state should never be done directly on the state. right? It should be done through an API. It says, hey, React, I want to modify the state so that it now is this different state. And React says, oh, okay, thank you. Because it's not just us manipulating here. There might be different things that are occurring. And what React is going to do is going to reconciliate, it's going to consolidate all the changes, right? And then it'll go and change the UI, right? Just like we're not allowed to directly manipulate the DOM, right, through jQuery or through JavaScript, all that is being handled by for us. Same thing. The state is also is also going to be handled for us as well. So yes, let's not do that. Let's not do that. Also, there's another issue here. The keyword this. The keyword this in Java, it's very clear what the keyword this means, right? It's the current instance of the object you're running in, right? Whereas in JavaScript, this doesn't always mean that, right? This oftentimes means whoever generated the event. It could mean the function that you're currently running in, right? Or it could also mean the class that you're running in. So this doesn't necessarily mean the current instance. So to resolve this issue that this sometimes means different things, right? There is a syntax for that. We bind the function of the meaning of this to its original meaning at the constructor level. So when we instantiate, this is really tied to the class, right, to the current instance. Yes, right? And so we are binding it and saying, hey, function, whatever, right? Remember that this means it means the instance of the class, not the instance of the object, not the function, right? So let's do that. Let's bind that. So in the constructor, you will find a lot of examples of this. We'll say this dot title changed is equal to this title change dot bind this. Right. So now in here, this always means the current instance of the object, right? Not the function. Okay. All right. So now we can say now we can do the following. We can say this dot state this dot instead of manipulating the state directly, instead we're going to use an API. We're going to say set state. Okay. Set state is going to write into the state. Okay. And what this function does is that, notice that we have two things in the state, right? We have the array of modules, and we have the new module that we're creating. Yes. Okay. So set state can take as argument a snippet or a subset of the entire state, and it will only change that part of the state that you want to change. Okay? So in this case, we only want to change the new module. We just want to change the new module. New module. We want to change the new module. The title of this new module, we want it to be event current target dot value. Okay. All right. We're saying that the title of this new module is whatever we are typing. All right. All right. Excellent. Let's see if this works. If it doesn't blow up. Just to verify that this is actually working, we can, let's see, we can render it anywhere, I guess. We can say this dot state dot new module dot title. Let's just render it there. Let's see if that works. So, oops, title of undefined. Oh, new alias, what? So as we type, notice that indeed, it's being rendered right on the DOM, right? Just an inline piece of text. Everybody good? So it looks like we are being able to store it and render it, just like any other expression. Now what we need to do is, now that we have the form is keeping track of what we typed, we can now focus on the button of what to do with this button, right? This button, what we're going to do is that we're going to call a function. And the function might look like something like the create module. And module presumably is going to create this new module. Right, so let's do a console log create new module, right? And we're going to call it by just tying it to onClick. We're going to say this dot create new module, create module. There it is. So let's see if that's tied together. So let's remove the console. So if we click on it, it's not rendering. What? This create. Oh, I need to bind it too. Let's bind it just like we did here. So this dot create module. This dot create module dot bind this. There it is. So every time we click on it, right, it's calling that function. Everybody good? Okay. From within that create button, right, we would like to have access to the state. We can say, I want to print out. Let's see if it's in there. We should be able to print out this dot state dot new module. Right. So for instance, if I type this is a new module, and I click on create, notice that indeed I can print out the actual object that I want to add. Yes.
Does it handle if you type and then delete as well? Will it handle that?
Oh yeah, yeah. It'll remove it, right? It's removing the title. Yep. It's on change. So every change that you make, it calls it, right? Well, not that you would call console every single time, but yes. Right. So what is it that we want to do with this new module? But basically, what we want to do is basically update that array, right? That array currently just has the current list of modules. What we could do is just add to that array. And the way we add is as following. We can say this dot state. We're going to change the state again. Set state. The list of modules. So modules. There's modules, right? Is going to be equal to what? Well, we could push into the array. We could push into that array, or there's a new syntax. The new syntax is called the spreader syntax, right? That says copy the content that is already there and append the following, basically, right? And the syntax is as follows. You can say dot, dot, dot. You can say this dot state dot modules. So whatever was already there, plus add this dot state dot new module. Right? So the spreader syntax allows you to copy content from what's already there. Creates the new elements. Looks like I don't have an ID. Right? I should create also an ID. Let's do that. When we create the module, we probably want to do also an ID. So the ID might be something like new date, get time. Right, now it's creating a new module. Right, and probably what we want to do is when we create a brand new module, we want to maybe erase the current title so you can type a brand new one. So you can say something like new module. I want to change also the state of the new module so that its title is blank. Right, so that as I type here, I do a create, it didn't blank it. What? Why are you not blanking it? New module, set state, create module. Oh, yes, we forgot something. In the input field, we can give it a default value of the input field and bind its value, bind it to the current value, state new module, right, dot title. So that if the title changes, right, the value of this input field will also change. So as you type here, and you say create, Notice that it clears it afterwards. Okay? Everybody good with me? All right.